were going to my grandmother's house, my mom would lean over the back of from the driver's seat and say, "Okay, Elspeth, we're going to Grandma's. You're not autistic the next little while, okay, until we get home. So get it out of your system before we reach Welland." And so, you know,
we can appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't think Joe would like it so much if I told her she no longer had a disability.
She may like it.
You may
Not
frustrate.
sure.
Yes. So we have mentioned some challenges as well. Is there anybody who has any specific challenges that maybe don't have the successful end that some of these have? Do you want to go?
I would say we both work in a school that is one of the Toronto segregated schools for children with disabilities. So we have all of these, well, not all of these, but several of these devices in all of our classrooms. And we just find the challenge is like money. Like there's so many kids that could benefit from so many more devices, and you know that they have so much to tell you, and we just don't have the money for the machines, or we don't have the staff. We only have 2.5 speech pathologists at our school that are kind of shared among so many schools, and it's great because they're able to make up so many communication books. Like we have several children that have laminated binders that they can go through and stuff, but it takes a while to build them up for each child so they're specific for them, and we just don't have the time or the money to do it. But it's really nice when you finally you see a kid that gets their funding come through and they're learning how to use their machine. And I mean, in terms of a success story, I remember there's one girl who's learning how to use her machine over and over again, and so I teach art, and you just hear red, 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 red across the room for the longest time, and then I hear a button, "Strutter," and then it's like, okay, I have something to tell you, and then I love you, and then I'm just like, oh.
It's all worth it.
Sorry, I know I keep putting.
That's okay.
I think being autistic sometimes, my theory of mind isn't good. So though I can communicate, I don't always understand when I need to. In school, though I was not at the time diagnosed with autism, I was diagnosed with a learning disability and attention deficit disorder, hyperactive behavior. And my grade 6 teacher decided that when I would go up to the front of the classroom and I'd have a question, and if I couldn't answer her in a set amount of time, she would scream at me, and so it was a lack of communication on the school's part, because they had not, she surely knew at this point because it was in my documents and I was going with the special ed, so it wasn't a big secret. But at the same time, it was a failure in my communication because I was at the time either too afraid to talk about it to other people or even to her, and also did not understand that because I had experienced it, other people had to know too. I couldn't separate that my mind was not shared by other people, so I didn't know to tell my parents or to talk to them about this is what's happening. And it sort of got to the point where you were at your desk and you ask yourself, do you really want to know the answer to question 4?
It's not worth it.
You're having a good day so far, and by good day I mean you haven't cried yet.
Yeah. And
it's only Tuesday, so that sort of became how I judged the goodness of the week, whether I'd broken down yet or not. So, and it was a failure to communicate on a few levels, myself and others in that stance. So,
absolutely. Do you want to talk about any challenges?
Well, we'll do the next slide, and then I'm not so good at winging it like so some of our major successes with school and communication is that it's functional for her. She's able to voice her opinions. It's kind of similar that Joe, for the longest time, would be very open and say whatever she was feeling when it came to home stuff. But as soon as it was school, and whether that was when I was with her at school for a couple days till the dislocated hip, or when it was at home, I couldn't get her to do the same give me the same answer, to open up and tell me what was going on. And it was the same thing, as she was treated a bit differently. She had kind of different expectations at school, and she had a really hard time with that. And so we worked our way back to, she'll voice her opinions, she'll voice her concerns. We had a meeting a little while ago, and one of Joe's big things, as we've mentioned many times, is the baby talk. And Joe actually had on her Mighty Mo, and we had it videotaped, and so I can never say it the same way Joe does, but she pretty much says, like, I'm 11 years old and I expect you to treat me like an 11-year-old, and I don't want to be baby talked, and you would be annoyed if I talked to you like a baby. And I can't remember what else she said, but she was really open about it. The other thing, one of her concerns was being left in the washroom for longer times than she needed, when there'd be staffing changes and maybe a coffee break or whatever. And so she made a comment that was awesome about how she thought that maybe they should sit in the bathroom while she had recess instead, or like, she was quite open, and it was just great to see her voicing her opinions, maybe not as politely as she should have, but she voiced them, and that was awesome. She's participating in all academics. She's doing everything grade 6 with the exception of these things that we're still working on, but she's doing everything grade 6 related, anything else at her grade level. She's participating socially in anything from any sort of field trip to whatever. She's there. She's doing it the exact same way as the kids, with maybe the odd modification. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get that out of her? Does she type this out?
That's a great question. There's lots of different things we do. Some of the obvious ones, we'll yes, know it, and then we'll get her to expand more by whether she's using her Mighty Mo in various pictures to make a sentence or whatever. Something specific like that one actually was one that she asked to use her IntelliKeys for, and we just took the keyboard out, we didn't hook it up, and then she typed out what she wanted to say. So she'll quite often do that if it's something where she specifically wants to say something really specific, then she'll use her IntelliKeys to quickly say that out. So
I tend to get really creative with questioning and just kind of say, okay, it's going to take a while, we'll use the yes and no. Once we get to the right area, we can narrow it down, then it'll speed up, and just start saying, okay, is this why you're mad? And she has a page about feelings, so she can tell us if she's mad or she's hurting or she's uncomfortable. Even at a really young age, she had a friend that she refused. She'd played with quite a bit in kindergarten and grade 1. Didn't want to invite her to her birthday party. And I said, this is odd. You guys have been great friends. No. So is there something that she said? And then you could tell, yeah. Like, okay. So give me a minute, I'll start asking questions and we'll figure it out. And it was a very typical grade 1 situation. The girl had said something, hurt Joe's feelings. She didn't want her to come to her birthday party. Once I was able to kind of go through that and talk to her about it, then I could say, okay, well, this is, if she said this, was this the situation? We could talk about the situation, and it's like any other kid of that age. And the same thing happened with a friend, Taylor, not so long ago. Exact same thing. All of a sudden, she didn't want to go anywhere with Taylor. It took a while. We had to figure out, okay, did Taylor say something? Did she do something? Did she embarrass you? And that's often what it is. When you're 11, you're easily embarrassed. You don't like your parents hanging around. You don't like your friends to make comments. You don't like anybody to know you have a G-tube. There's things like that that become a massive issue. And it's exactly that kind of thing where you just have to kind of keep going and going and going.
Yeah, so she is totally experiencing age-appropriate things, and she's building friendships, which is awesome. I had to laugh. We walked into school the other day, and it was like this massive horde of kids. Joe! And they took pictures of her, and I joke, I actually call her Hollywood all the time as her nickname, and that's exactly what it was like. We were swarmed. I had cameras left for winging at me, and I was taking pictures of all these kids with her. Oh, she was excited. Some of our challenges I mentioned before was the physical demands versus communication needs. So getting her academically to write a paragraph while standing in a standing frame is almost impossible. That would be so much work for her and would take hours. So we always think about that. And one of the things in some sessions that we learned was, it's Karen Erickson, right, with the red light, green light, yellow light. And we use 1, 2, 3, or we just talk about it. But Joe knows that model. She knows that's what I kind of decide how I'm going to ask her a question is based on that kind of model. And so I'll quite often ask her, okay, so I wanted to review multiplication today while you're in your standing frame. Do you think that would be okay? And she'll tell me, nope, I'm too tired. No, I don't think that's a good idea. And she'll tell me what she wants to do instead. Or she'll say, I need to sit in my wheelchair for this. So that's been great, and it's been great that Joe's getting older and she's able to communicate those things as well. She also has them on her Mighty Mo. Hello, my body's working too hard. I can't do this right now, or whatever. So that's been a great way, but it's still a challenge sometimes to remember that and to keep that in mind. So knowing when to use the right piece of technology. When I started out at the beginning of this year, I hadn't worked with Joe in a school before. I'd worked in a school with other kids, but never with Joe and never with so much technology. So I'm like, okay, we're focusing on vocabulary with social, and there's so many words in grade 6 social they need to learn. So I start flipping them on the Mighty Mo and getting them there and spending hours on the Mighty Mo. And I would spend like 2 or 3 weeks on a chapter, and then we move to the next one. I'm like, well, that took me hours for 20 minutes. And I'd get so annoyed. And one day, Suman goes, why don't you just use Post-it notes? So I'm like, oh. So now I write them on Post-it notes. Joe uses them the same way she would, but just it's an easier way. So knowing when to use the right piece of technology, when to like go high tech,
Sometimes communication
low-tech.
between the aide and the teacher is the issue as well.
Yes.
That's how Joe's done spelling for years. Ever since grade 1, when they start, your weekly spelling list, they'd come home and either, depending on whether the goal was to be able to recognize the word or spell the word, either we'd have the letters all mixed up and she'd have to indicate on sticky notes. Like, it's the cheapest way to go.
Seriously the best idea. Now we invest in so many colors. It's fantastic. Staff must be open and see child's abilities and potentials. We've had, as we've talked about Joe being baby talked before, there are certain people that don't see Joe the same way as we might, and that's been really difficult for Joe, especially when it comes to schoolwork. If you see her as, a little kid and baby, you're not going to give her the same academic workload, and that's going to cause lots of issues later on. So that's always been a struggle, and it continues to be, and probably will be for a long time. But it's
Probably
always
will.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge.
So what we'd like to do is to also move on to the community. And again, this is another situation where when we're in a school setting, we don't always get to see the full variety or the full scope of things that kids with severe disabilities might do in the community. Again, as we've said, Joe likes to do just about anything anybody else does. Sometimes the easy things like the carousel, although this one in particular is tricky because it's a completely redone turn-of-the-century carousel, so you can't stand on the ground. All of the pieces move, including the base. So you have to actually sit on the horse if Joe's going to ride it. We usually make Aaron do that. Joe quite enjoys going to IKEA and pushing the cart, and sometimes holding my coffee. Joe is very good at the nonverbal communication, and so ice cream, deep-fried ice cream at the Mexican restaurant is one of her faves.
And I don't think you can quite see it there, but her tongue is actually between her lips, and Joe loves raspberries, and that's one of her big things that she's done for a really long time, and that's a huge yes, or I'm really excited, or whatever. The other thing she does opposite is we call it the bitter beer face, where she'll go, and we can tell she doesn't like it, she hates it. Yes.
Does she actually eat?
Ice cream, yeah. She would eat maybe small bits of the coating. She loves the hot sauce, the whipped cream, the ice cream. And really, she doesn't eat massive amounts. We actually chose to have a G-tube done. And the pediatrician that we had was amazing and basically said, there may come a time where we force you to do it. She may have lost enough weight, she may be malnourished, you may not have the choice. Should you at some point in time choose to have it done, I will make everything happen to have it done for her. The big reason we had it done just days after her 3rd birthday. And there were 2 main reasons. One being that from the time that her disability started to kick in, she stopped really drinking much. And her body doesn't process heat well. So she doesn't necessarily sweat as much as her body needs to, but she can get dehydrated very easily. And she just is not a big drinker. So that hydration was a big issue for us, and the other was medication administration. Because of the seizures, the medication that she has to take and the variety of meds are just awful. They're absolutely disgusting. Nobody should have to actually taste them. We tried hiding them in everything, and as a result, since the time of about 2.5, she's never eaten pudding. She refuses to eat yogurt. She won't eat, I can't even think the list of things that we hid meds in that she won't eat now. And it's just sort of that residual trauma from having had so many different meds hid inside them. In the end, it's worked out quite well because she has had quite a few, I don't know, 35, I don't know how many hospitalizations. And so it's easy to just hook up the G-tube. We make sure she maintains her weight. She's never been malnourished. And in fact, she was just hospitalized 2 weeks ago for some seizure activity, some breakthrough seizures. And We had to deal with a very new dietitian. Our dietitian was on holidays. Very new dietitian who came in and said, you know, like she's not getting enough calories. She gets a tube feed all night long. This lady was irate, and you could tell, like, she really, by the third or fourth time she'd come in to ask us questions, you could tell she was seriously thinking that maybe this was a little bit of a social services issue. And she kept saying, you know, like, this is all the feed that she gets. And we'd say, yes. She'd say, well, does she get anything else?